The second day of Frame Lab 2019. This will be a big chunk of full circle, content track full circle. And we organized this content track together with our partner, What Design Can Do. What Design Can Do is an event that is based out of Amsterdam, but meanwhile has a really global presence and is dealing with sustainability, social responsibility in its widest form. But more about that later. We'll first have yet another panel discussion over here, which will all revolve around building a sustainable design practice. So sustainability is no longer a buzzword only used by marketeers. It's something real and something here to stay, something that designers need to take into account when building a practice, and what clients need to take into account when commissioning designers. So has the wealth of discourse about sustainability, we are all aware of it, made it easier or more difficult to build a sustainable design practice and to have sustainable behavior as a client? That's the intent of the discussion that will follow next. And I would like to welcome to stage the following people. Howard Sullivan, co-founder and creative director of YourStudio, and yes, please put your hands together for Howard. Remy Heijer, of the very new Dutch design initiative Inside. Remy Heijer. Gyula, he is the real estate development director at Cairn Real Estate. And Hester van Dijk, owner and founder of Overtreders W, a local design practice with sustainability at its highest regard. This panel discussion will be moderated by Richard van der Laken, and he is the founder and director of What Design Can Do.
Hello, once again, my name is Richard van der Laken. I'm the founder and director of What Design Can Do, collaborating today with Frame. It's an honor to be here. We're going to have a discussion. I'm going to sit in that corner, and I will leave the floor hopefully to you all.
We'll make some room.
Let me first, let me immediately start. When you talk about sustainable practice today, that's of course a very broad, I would say it's a very broad framing. How would you look at that from that perspective?
It's a broad frame. I think from the previous panel discussion about gender in design, sustainability and sustainable practice is very similar in that we're still having to have a lot of conscious debate about it, but it should be implicit and embedded in any design process. Because I see, as designers, we're almost at the very beginning of any form of production or interior, and it's our role to be creative and balance that with the excitement and optimism of what we can do for the future.
And how do you look at that from a real estate perspective?
We as a real estate developer, we have to more and more be conscious about the materials we use in the building and also how they are being made. Mm-hmm. Because there's really a big social awareness about the products we use in the building. So yeah, of course, and when we work with designers, we tend to ask more and more, okay, so where it's from, how do you make it, and in which way is it sustainable? So it's a topic which is really on our top of mind these days.
Mm-hmm. And because the danger, of course, is that I can imagine that also from your perspective, and your field of working, you could also say that it can be used as a sort of greenwashing.
Yes, it does, and a lot of.
And how do you deal with that?
How do you deal with it? Well, the difficulties I experience in developing a building is that actually the sustainability is next to the well-being. Well-being is also a thing which is really on top of a new topic which we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And those two are not always
In tune with each other.
exactly. And I am having serious debates with interior designers about these two topics, because sustainable doesn't always mean well-being or beautiful or nice. And so that is a topic we are very debating on.
That's probably one of the big challenges, how you can
It is
bring those
it is
together.
a big challenge. But about the greenwashing, I think you can't greenwash that much anymore, because people know and people do also their own research. So greenwashing is, I think it's a little bit stupid as a developer doing it, because people will go right through it.
Yeah.
So
You think that the audience nowadays is aware enough?
it's much
to
more
see that and
the
recognize
debate
that.
between circularity, sustainability, and aesthetic, because circularity is, in my point of view, not always aesthetic, and there we have a problem, because you want to make it aesthetic, but you also want to.
Yeah.
We have to go to this circular economy, and
But that's the challenge in the definition of beauty, isn't it? 'Cause
exactly.
people's perception of beauty might be traditionally marble finishes and lots of luxurious materials, and the
Yeah.
new beauty and the new soul of products and finishes is that they might be more exciting and jarring to people's resonance of what signifies quality.
Yeah.
But they have the soul, don't they? They tell a story.
Exactly, but we as a project developers and making buildings, we maybe tend to have this old point of view about beauty. So that's where we have the debate.
Yeah, maybe that's also interesting for you to tap into, Hester, because as one of the founders of Overtreders Way, I think during the Dutch Design Week you gave some very interesting perspectives on how to deal with this topic. For example, from the People's Pavilion that you designed. Can you elaborate a bit on this?
Yeah, well, I think it's not necessarily that circular design does not have to be beautiful, but the beauty can be found in a different way, I think, and you have to be more precise as a designer. But I certainly agree that it's not, if you build something and it's ugly, then you shouldn't have built it at all.
True.
Yeah, but we work a lot with circular materials, or we try to build things out of second-hand materials, and we always try to make it as good as new, or even better than new. But it takes a lot of work, and what we mainly do is to organize materials in a nice way.
Esther, can you maybe also for the audience tell us a bit more about how you worked on this People's Pavilion during the Dutch Design Week?
Yeah, we built the People's Pavilion at the Dutch Design Week in Eindhoven in 2017. We were asked by the organizers of the Dutch Design Week, can you make a building for 200 people that will exist for just 1 week? And then we said, yeah, we could probably do that, but it's also kind of a stupid question, because we're in the middle of Eindhoven and there are lots of buildings that you could use to seat 200 people. So why do you need it? And then they said, well, we want to make a statement about architecture. What will architecture do in the future? So we want this building anyway, and it's up to you how to make it. And then we thought, if we make something for just 1 week, we don't want to make any trash. So let's try to make the whole building out of borrowed materials. And then we made a sketch, and we thought, what materials can we get in big quantities? So we started with wood, because there's plenty of wood, of course, available. And we went to the biggest wholesaler of wood in the Netherlands, called the Stiho, and we said, can we borrow like 20 kilometers of your wood? And they looked at us as if we were crazy, and they said, but what will happen afterwards? Do we get it back? Yes, sure, because we borrow it. And we also had to promise, of course, if you borrow something, you have to give it back unharmed. So we couldn't screw the wood or glue it or nail it, but we had to give the same wooden beams back to the Stiho. So we had to develop a whole new construction system, and in the end we used metal straps to strap the whole building together. And we not only used wood, but we also had 12 concrete poles heipalen that are used in the Netherlands because otherwise everything just sinks into the mud. We made a new facade material out of recycled plastics ourselves, and we borrowed the roof from a greenhouse, and some parts of the walls were originally interior walls from a derelict office. So, and even the interior we all borrowed from Vitra furniture and some old church benches.
And how did people react, especially how did the industry react on this?
Well, it was very interesting because the people who borrowed the wood and all the other materials to us, they were all from the industry, and they were really surprised that we managed to do it, because they all thought it's a crazy idea and let's give it a try, but we're not sure if you're actually going to make it. But it's also the fact that the building was there also helped to spread the idea of using a different approach of material use, because also all those suppliers used it as a networking event and invited all their partners and said, look, this is what they made out of our materials, and next week we get it.
Do you see this as more as a statement, or is it something that you would say, well, this is how we should do, this is how we should build, this is how we should make things now and in the future?
I don't think this is the only way to make things, but it's I would really like to try to see if we can also make more permanent buildings and interiors with the same approach.
Yeah. Hey, Remy, how do you implement this sustainable idea in your practice? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, sure. Well, I work for the Dutch Green Building Council, so we started this initiative Inside. So where we are in between designers and producers. So we look at how can we connect information about sustainability in products and materials, and how can we give them to designers? Because I think a big problem right now is the information on what choice do you make, what is more sustainable, and you can figure it out, you can contact the producer, but you're still, it's really hard for a designer to make this comparison. So I think a big part of the problem is getting insight in your choices. So if you want to design sustainable, you get the right information to make the good choices and make more sustainable interiors. Because I speak to a lot of architects, designers, and they all tell me we all have this small Excel sheet or database to where our producers that we like or we think they have a great story, but they still don't know. And it's a full-time job to keep all the contacts, all the producers, all the new products. So I think if you can give more insight and knowledge to all the designers, they can provide that knowledge to their clients. Because I think as a designer, you are the advisor to your client, and a client probably is going to build every 30 years or renovate every 10 years, and you're the expert, you're doing it every day. So I think a designer should be the inspiration to the client to make better choices in sustainability.
Do you see that as a responsibility of the designer?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yes.
Because I think it's the responsibility of everybody to be more sustainable. And I think we should really help clients to think in another way and make sustainability more beautiful and make better design. And it asks a lot of people, because we can't expect marble, we can't expect shiny white buildings anymore. But we can make other great stuff that is still spectacular and still great. And as luxurious, but then in a sustainable way. But you need to, at least 90% of your clients, you have to convince them that's also the way to go.
Yeah, okay.
It is also like, I also expect that from my advisors on interior design, because for me it's a big hassle to go look after if the product he advises is sustainable. I just want it to be sustainable. And if it's not, and I find out afterwards, then you will have a problem.
Yeah.
I think I do agree that it's a responsibility of the designer.
Yeah.
How do you see that, and how is it also from a UK perspective? When we talk about, we just touched upon that a little bit, when you talk about greenwashing, and how is that in the UK going?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this within the studio because there are some clients who are jumping on a bit of a kind of green wheelbarrow to roll out the idea that they're sustainable, but ultimately there's a lot of talk and debate about sustainability. There's a lot of new work being done in sustainability, and any work to champion that with your clients, whether for whatever motivation they're using it, they're giving a message and they're reaching a lot of people. And I think retail is one sector that we work in which is laced with problems, but then it's also laced with the potential to reach a huge amount of people. And in the education piece, I think it's really essential. As studios, we need to keep educating ourselves all the time because there's so much development. Your project, Hester, really, really, really inspired us. I mean, it was an incredible, moving project in that every part of that went back as a raw material and it wasn't wasted or damaged. And when you're working with sometimes a project that's got fast turnover, that's a real challenge. So we haven't got all the solutions yet, and I think it's important as studios we keep learning and keeping our skills really fresh, and then relaying that really excitedly to our clients, because as you said, you want your consultants to be advising you what to do. It's something that should be implicit in the process. And it is something that as a designer, you're a problem solver. You're not just creating with a magic wand and thinking about what you might like to do. So what's good.
Yeah, so do you also in that sense see it as a sort of a responsibility of the designer?
It's a responsibility to embrace with enthusiasm, because parameters of anything give you lots more, a wealth of opportunities where a completely blank sheet of paper can be not always the best way to start. So I think, yeah, there was a really interesting exhibition as London Design Festival in October called Plastic Scene, and it was all about dismissing this guilt feeling around plastics. There's the equivalent of the weight of the whole world of human beings every year produced in plastics, which is 400 million tons. So what are we doing with this? There's loads of waste. Yes, there's lots of energy used, but it's just one part of the debate. There's so much stuff happening, and we want to reduce materiality and have kind of light solutions to projects, but equally we can step forward with a sense of excitement about what the opportunities are. And also, whenever we've showed clients new materials and new approaches, we're all predominantly designers and in the design realm, so we see these mycelium panels and these really ultra interesting products. They really excite us and they really excite clients once you have them in front of them. So the debate becomes easier when they see the mood board and they hear the stories behind what you're presenting, which is not something detrimental to the future, it's something helpful, sustainable.
You could say maybe that nowadays designers have to be some kind of wizards. And not so long ago, it was very clear, okay, you ask a designer to do this and that. And nowadays, you have a whole spectrum of things that designers have to tap into. Is that something we can demand from creatives? Because I think that you can see that almost in every discipline, whether it's interior design, architecture, graphic design, you name it. It's all the different medias, all the different levels. It's about aesthetics, it's about functionalism, it's about sustainability.
Is
that something we can demand from designers?
Yeah, throws the challenge. I mean, it's the rigor and it's the sorcery and seduction, which is the bit that happens that gets exciting, but behind that there has to be a really rigorous process. And it's a work in progress. We all have to be tapping into anything that feeds into the process and the work we're doing and the relationships and the collaborations, because Hester, your project wouldn't have happened without collaboration, and the appetite of clients and everyone working together is what's really needed.
Hester, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge demand that you make from designers, but it's also, you have a huge responsibility, I think, as a designer. As soon as you start making things, whether it be architecture or products, you put something into the world, and then it's there to stay or maybe not. And actually yesterday during the jury sessions, we had a very interesting debate about this. And one of the other jury members said, you always have to think of the consequence when you make something. You can't just make it and think, oh, that's a nice idea, and then your responsibility doesn't stop because the thing is there. And what I also find, I think in architecture, sustainability is now really becoming more and more important, and in interior design it's still quite difficult, I think, because there are a lot of sustainable products on the market, for example chairs and tables, and they all have been well made and you can take them apart if you don't need them anymore. But When you make an interior and you need flooring, for example, then maybe the material itself is really sustainable, but the only way to use it is to glue it on the floor, and then it can be sustainable, but you can never remove it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have the toxics of the glue in your
Yeah.
building,
Yeah.
which is another theme which we were on the way of health, well-being and health. We are using all kinds of materials which doesn't have any toxic anymore. And that's really hard because if you dive into that, you see how much toxic actually a lot of products still have. And that's also the challenge for designers because, if you design something, you have to make it. And how can you make things healthy and also sustainable? That is really...
Yeah, maybe that's also part of the statement that Hester made with this People's Pavilion.
Yeah.
Is that when you build, in a way, you should build less, which is a sort of a contradiction.
Yeah.
Because we want to make new things, but how can you deal with that concept? But it, of course, also has to do with the real estate industry itself.
Of course.
Doesn't that sometimes feel weird that, in fact, we should stop, we should do less instead of more, but then suddenly the economy stops, or what happens then?
Or make existing buildings different.
Yeah, so how do you deal with that?
That's what we have. We bought a huge portfolio of existing buildings, which we are totally redeveloping.
Yeah.
And then you just demolish on a zero waste manner. We have a zero waste manner of demolishing all things, and then I have a huge industrial place where I store all my things which are coming from this building. So if you need some things, you can call me. I have a lot of material to give away.
What's your phone number, please?
Yeah, really. No, but it is
I'd like
true,
to see
and some of the stuff I sell, and some of the stuff I keep, so I can do something with it. But that's what we say to our companies who are leasing. We have a zero waste way of demolishing the interior of the building, and then we try to build also a sustainable and healthy way, build new things in the building.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is a very big challenge, and it's totally not 100% perfect, but also we have to just try and do things and have fiercely debates with all people who are involved.
Remy, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
There's a very famous designer. By the way, it's not an interior designer, but it's a graphic designer. His name is Bruce Mau. He's from Canada.
Yeah.
And he has this, in my opinion, pretty interesting slogan. And he says, "Design brought us into this shit.
Yeah.
And now design is going to get us out of this shit." Do you believe that? Did design bring us into this shit, and is also design the key to get us out of this shit?
Referring to her, what you said is when we design something, we bring in shit into this world.
Yeah.
So it's like you should be really conscious on what you design, how do you design, how do you use it. And since a couple of years or longer, circularity becomes a bigger thing. And the thoughtship of that is that you can bring it back to an original form or reuse it, or the way you design it for not just the purpose of the product itself, but thinking long-term. And I think if that's what meant by design, thinking long-term design, and that's what we're starting to do now, like what are you going to do with your design after you're finished or it doesn't get used anymore? I think we can get out of this shit, quoting. But I do believe that the first step in design is thinking, do you really need it? And does it contribute to what we're doing here or what we need? Or can we make great design that lasts longer? And not just about consuming and producing, but also thinking about, do we need it? How long does it get used? And what can we do afterwards? So,
or turn the shit into value. And then, because I'm sure, and I'm really that buildings will, the value of buildings will in maybe 10, 20 years will be the material within the building and not so much the building itself.
Yeah.
So if we turn the
Yeah.
shit into something value, then
Yeah.
you can...
Yeah.
Turning shit into value. I
Yeah.
think that we should have that here on the screen.
Yeah, it's true.
No, it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
it's-
And that needs great design to
Exactly.
keep the value and make the value usable again.
Yeah. True.
Howard, is design going to bring us
I'm
out of this
mulling
shit?
over this one. Did we get us into this shit? I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because there's a whole load of industries that overlap to get us to the stage we're at with extreme overconsumption.
Mm-hmm.
Design plays a part of that. I think the role of us being able to save or herald a new way of thinking is powerful, and it's definitely our responsibility. We've got a role in this, hugely, one of the biggest roles. Yes, it's a very difficult debate because we're still creating stuff, and we could just freeze everything. So much stuff still gets thrown away. It takes a lot of energy to recycle things, so
Yeah.
not everything about recycling is reducing carbon footprints because of the heat and the mechanisms to recreate materials. It's just exciting that there's a very, on the zeitgeist, everyone has got this front of mind. So if you look at universities now, and students, they're obsessed by the idea of getting us out of this shit. And the stuff they're doing is really inspiring and mind-blowing. There's a lot of it out here to look at in the show. So I think we're all human beings, and we've got a conscience and empathy, and we're trying as hard as we can to pull together as an organism to try and do the best we possibly can. So I'm not answering the question straight, but I think we're partly getting us out of the shit.
Yeah.
We're doing our
And
best.
maybe in addition to what I said, I think it's also about our behavior in consuming,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
great design can do a lot. So if we're gonna consume in any way interior products or buildings, great design could get us out of the shit, I believe that, but it's about our behavior in consuming in the first place. And,
Yeah.
and I think already a change is going on in our conscious, at least in my surroundings. But I think that's the biggest change we need to make, and not just design-wise.
Yeah.
Or-
That's interesting what you say there. At the end of the road, it's of course all about changing behavior from our side, from the clients we work with, the consumers, the audience, the citizens, whatever you want to call it. But for that, you need to be aware. So that
Yeah.
you need to educate yourself. Hester, how do you do that? Because you have a flourishing practice. The
I'm a-
daily beast has to be fed. How do you deal with that? How do you educate yourself?
I educate myself as we go, I think. I'm really a very hands-on person. So whenever we start working on a project, we always find interesting things that we never thought about. And then you dig into it and dig deeper, and that's the way we do it. But we don't really do formal training or courses or stuff.
Yeah, so would you say that that's more a form of research that you do, and
Yeah.
you educate yourself by researching the projects that you work on?
Yeah, that's the good word, I think.
Okay. And how do you do that from
Um,
your real estate
I-
perspective?
Well, I once...
Be educated, man.
Yes, no, I once built my own house in Spain. So
Yeah.
If you build your own, you will...
And you learn,
Then you learn, trust me.
That's what I mean.
I believe.
But I also read a lot books, and I am also starting a foundation to make people aware about the influence of buildings.
Yeah.
And if people get aware about how buildings can influence us as a people, I think that's where it starts. We have to increase the awareness of people on all kinds of topics, not only on sustainability but also on well-being. And then, then you have the first step, and I think that's the most important one.
Yeah.
Because if you as a consumer are aware, you will also be more aware as a whatever you do in life.
Mhm.
So, yeah. But I can really recommend everybody to build their own house. Then you learn a lot.
Learning by doing.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
also
I think
one.
it's an important one.
Yeah.
And Remy, how do you see that? Because you, as you just said, you're in that sense educating people and clients.
Yeah,
So,
k-
but
yeah,
how do
kind
you,
of,
how do
yeah,
you
well-
keep on track for yourself?
I think it's always really good to talk to everybody,
Yeah.
because what we're doing here is this sustainable platform, spreading information.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of initiatives in the Netherlands, worldwide as well, or certifications. I always believe it's really important to know what they are doing and why is that good, why is that benefiting, or why are people benefiting from them, and also for yourself. So don't be close-minded. I don't know if that's an expression, but be open-minded about your competitors, about other producers, about ideas from each other, and be able to share them. And I think that's the great thing we should start doing now, and not just keep it for yourself, your great idea, but share it, share your information, share your experience. And maybe it might be a bit ideologic to think that way, but yeah, for me, I want to talk to everybody and hear their experience about design or products or ways of giving information. Yeah.
Okay. Howard?
And in a similar way about sharing and understanding and collaborating, we've dedicated more resource within our business now to looking at this full time. So we have a platform called YS Makers in the London studio. So we have talks and events once every Thursday. We have an influential person working with sustainability and design coming into the studio, and then we try and forge collaborations to see whether the mixture of our design team and that incredible mind can work on a project together. And since we started it officially last year around May, we've worked on a couple of projects where we've had these collaborations, and it's really helped bring sustainability into a project. And also the fact that it's a named entity and part of our studio has surprisingly sprung a lot of new conversations in clients that we work with and brands who are quite intrigued by what's going on. And we're setting the talks this year with the clients coming. It's been internal up to now, but...
Okay. Then, because I see that we're not running out of time, but I think we're right on time. So I have one last question for all of you. I'm not going to bring this issue, how do you say that? Make it the responsibility of the next generation, because I think we are all equally responsible for a sustainable planet and also for a sustainable way of working in our industry. But maybe you can say that I am a little bit older. Let's stick to myself. I, for myself, can say that when I was educated as a designer, I missed some aspects when it comes, for example, to sustainability, awareness, knowledge. Can you say something about what maybe you missed in your education, what you think that should be absolutely on the agenda right now when it comes to design education? Or is it a very, it might be a very heavy question?
It is quite heavy. Yeah, your formal design education only lasts about 4 years if you're lucky. So you can't really learn everything at the same time. So I missed a lot. Yeah, for sure. But as I said,
let's frame it in another way. There's a school now in France, in Nice, and that's called the Sustainable Design School. So they focus on design and they educate students from this perspective, how you combine design with sustainability. You could argue that should be logical, that should be very normal, that is how do you say that, woven into education nowadays.
Yeah, but it's true. There's still not a lot of awareness about sustainability, I think, in design education in the Netherlands, at least. Because, for example, I was a guest teacher at a design school last year, and the students had to make a temporary exhibition for a real client. And when we started, I presented my work, and I told them, okay, guys, this will only last for a few weeks, so maybe you have to think about what will happen after the exhibition is finished. But I was the only teacher hammering on the subject, and in the end, they made something out of MDF and painted it. And it will have.
So in that sense, there's still a lot to do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And how do you see that from your perspective?
Well, in building, of course, the architect is, by constructing a building, has a big responsibility. But we, as a developer, can also demand and teach ourselves more about not only the prices of material, because that's what we're focused on, but also where does the material come from and is it sustainable. So, like, I think wood will be a very big material in the future to build with, because it can be produced sustainable instead of concrete. Also, in terms of well-being, concrete is really not really good in terms of well-being and in terms of sustainability. So wood will be a product which we have to, as developers, teach ourselves more about how to build buildings with wood, for example. So that's...
Remy, is education keeping up with reality?
I think when I look back at my education in architecture, it was you come up with a concept and then you start materializing or you start working it out. I think it should be interesting if we, or for that school, if they start from the other way around, like you have certain materials or certain ways of building, and then start designing from that way. Not, I have this big concept and now I'm going to think about sustainability and put in a heat pump, because that's what we did, and we got an A. But then start doing it the other way around. And I think back then, and that's not that long ago, but there was less information that there is now. So I think that would be a good idea to approach it like that. Yeah.
Good to know. Howard, the last words are for you.
Last words. So I think I agree with you, Richard, in that when I studied, sustainability wasn't right at the forefront of the thinking. And a few of us in the practice teach. I was visiting lecture at the Royal College in Westminster, working on a project with them now. There's definitely a huge thinking about sustainability and materiality, but I think there's a lack of rigor in formal subjects and classes around it. So I think simply the example you mentioned in Nice, a slice of that in every university that's any form of design and making, to just ensure that there's a rigor to the understanding around that, because there's a lot of experimentation, but there's a lack of concrete understanding at that level sometimes, which should be beneficial. That's my take.
Dear people, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that hopefully there are questions. You can ask these people questions when they are off stage, not on stage, and then we go to the next part of the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.